be wondering why I'm wearing an outfit that would tempt PETA to cover me in red paint. Yes, the things I'm wearing today are made from real animals. But don't worry, I'm not about to tell you to wear only fur coats from now on. I am an animal costume designer as part of my education at RISD's film program. I'm also an animal caretaker, both today at RISD's Edna Lawrence Nature Lab and in my personal life with my chickens. You might notice I'm wearing feathers today, and I'm happy to say that I collected them from my birds. If given more time, I'd tell you which chicken each feather is from. I'm here today because some of you are probably artists. So am I. Yet, we as artists don't often have the privilege of knowing what the media we work with is made out of. I have bad news. Probably, somehow, it's made out of plastic. Take the paint that the hypothetical animal rights activists would use. There's a lot of different kinds of paints, but it would probably be a bucket of paint from an easily accessible source. Let's just say Home Depot. Now, most paints today are made with acrylic, as I'm sure the painting majors know. And if I go into Home Depot, what's the first bucket I see? 100% acrylic for the binding agent. Now, acrylic is great. It's actually an entire family of polymers, so it's made into a plethora of different things. Artists are probably using acrylate polymers for more than they realize. Plexiglass is a big example, and most superglues are also made with acrylic. There is one material I want to highlight, though. Acrylonitrile, which you can see here up on the screen, also called acrylic fiber. It's used to make synthetic fabrics, and a lot of you are probably wearing it right now. It can be used to make all sorts of things, yarns, canvas, and here's a big one, fake fur. Think about it. We just covered plastic in painting, sculpture, apparel, and everybody who uses superglue. And that's just acrylic. I could also talk about plastics like PVC, polyester, nylon, but again, if we did that, we'd be here all night. Plastics are called synthetic because they're made by humans. This is in contrast to natural materials, which we get from the world around us. There's a bunch of these too. A lot of them are based on plants, so you have things like wood, linen, cotton, some types of oils. The list goes on, but as you might have guessed, I'm here to talk about something more controversial. Like with plastics, if I tried to name every animal product that artists use, we'd be here all night. So instead, I'm just going to cover the ones that we usually use in apparel and sculpture. So this encompasses things like leather, fur, feathers, and wool. Now, I'm sure you all know what those are, but there's still a bit more to be said for each. Leather can be made from any animal with strong skin. So you have buckskin, sheepskin, ostrich leather, alligator leather. All of this is in addition to cowhide. Furs are the same way. You can make furs out of raccoons, foxes, beavers, maybe even animals we're more familiar with, like dogs. And of course, feathers, my favorite. We usually industrially get these from ostriches or geese, but we can also acquire them from any bird, particularly ones like chickens or guinea fowl. And finally, there's wool, which, as you probably know, is sheared from sheep, but we can get it from other animals too, like goats or alpacas. Now, what sets these things apart from the synthetic materials? There's a lot of things, actually. For one, we haven't synthetically made anything that realistically represents a feather, so there's some structures in nature that we just can't create ourselves. These products also evolved to serve the animals first. So leather is strong because skin needs to be strong, and fur is warm because it needed to keep the animal warm first. And this is what leads to the problem with natural materials. In order for us, humans, to use them, we have to take them from another living creature first. Now, sometimes, like with sheep, it's actually a harmless and beneficial process for the animal. Sheep need to be sheared to stay clean and healthy. But with other things, like fur and leather, the animal actually needs to die in order for us to use it. We even see this with feathers. Usually feathers don't shed in the quantities that we need them for, so we'll just kill a goose and kill its group at once, and then use all the feathers at once. And the ways that we get these materials can be absolutely horrible. Look at the conditions that ranched fur rabbits are kept in before they die. No animal should have to live its entire life in an unsanitary cage. So, this is the ethical question that leads to organizations like PETA. Why would we ever hurt an animal when we could instead just make a synthetic alternative? I mean, I already told you how fake fur is made, and it can be just as warm and soft as the real thing. The same goes for things like wool. It can be created with plastic if you have objections to shearing sheep for some reason. And leather? We've had vegan leather figured out for over a century now. You take cloth, you press some plastic into it, and create a leather texture. If we want to be the most harmless we can possibly be, we should probably just make everything out of plastic, right? Then we're not hurting anyone. Except we actually are. Strap in. It turns out that fake leather honestly sucks. Now, let's go back to acrylic for a second. It's great stuff. It's fake fur. It's yarn. Whatever you need it to be. And we also don't have to kill anybody for it. But what happens to it after we make it and use it? Well, we throw it away and it magically disappears, right? Remember, plastic doesn't break down. You're starting to see the problem now, aren't you? And what happens to acrylic even before we have to dispose of it? While plastic itself lasts a long time, the things that we make out of plastic can break down quickly. When you wash synthetic fibers, they shed just like any other fiber. Acrylics, specifically, shed about 730,000 small particles each time that they're washed. Wait, hold on. There's another word for these particles. You might have actually been waiting for me to say it. What could it be? Microplastics. Now, you probably know what microplastics are. They're a very, very dangerous form of pollution because they're very insidious. They're in our waterways, they're in our soil, and according to the Medical University of Vienna, you've probably had a credit card's worth of them pass through your stomach this week alone. So, we're throwing out acrylic, right? We're not using that anymore. Woof! Get rid of that. All right, so we're fine now, right? There's other alternatives. But the problem is all plastics, not just acrylic. We didn't evolve alongside them. Nothing on this planet has. So nothing is evolved to break them down. Instead, they just break down into smaller and smaller pieces and then get into smaller and smaller places, like our blood. Now, most of this research has been recent, so we don't know the full extent of what microplastics have done to our bodies yet. An unfortunate thing, to be sure. But so far, the results aren't promising. We've learned that microplastics have specific effects on humans, specifically those of male fertility. We've also learned that microplastics can be passed between mothers and children through breastfeeding. And as someone who works with these plastics a lot in my own personal free time, we often have to wear masks while cutting fake fur in large quantities, because otherwise the particles will be aerated, and if inhaled, will build up in our lungs, never to break down. And this isn't even talking about the plastics that are inherently harmful to people, like PVC. The stuff that our pipes are made out of. And we aren't the only ones affected by all this plastic either. We haven't, again, been able to check everybody, but we've found microplastics in the blood of cows and pigs, and those are just the animals that we've been able to test so far. And this isn't even talking about the macroscopic pollution or the fossil fuels needed to manufacture these plastics. We have no idea how much damage we have already done to everybody else besides humans. So this is where the ethics question comes back. What's more important to us? Saving a hutch of rabbits from becoming a fur coat, or preserving the land that those rabbits are living on long term so that more rabbits can live there in the future? Now, I need to emphasize this. I am not here to advocate for switching all of our textiles out with things like leather. Aside from not wanting a kink parade all day, every day, the problems behind animal product production are real and should be scrutinized. Factory farming, for meat or for fur, is inherently destructive to our environment and cruel to our animals. And also, as an animal welfare advocate myself, I think that going around making coats out of puppies is kind of in poor taste. So, what can we do to use animal products as artists responsibly? We can't overhaul our industries overnight. To the vegans watching this, you all are onto something with abolishing factory farms. I really think you are. But I can't snap my fingers and get rid of them any more than I can snap my fingers and immediately unplastic every industry that we have. So in addition to long-term overhaul, our focus should be on utilizing every part of the animal possible. And this is where creativity comes in. We can take chicken feathers and use them alongside goose down. We can do more research into animals that aren't usually used for leather. One of the beauties of things like fur and leather is also how long they last, so that we can reuse them after we've made something with them initially. This is post-consumer use. So you can go to a thrift store and you can find a fur coat and reuse it. And that way, in making a new coat, you don't have to kill another animal in order to have that coat. We also should be looking at environmentally supportive sources of animal products. We, humans, function as apex predators in our environment, but we've been doing a terrible job of that. For instance, we have fatal deer overpopulation in the eastern USA due to us killing off our native wolves. Yet, deer meat and fur are somehow something that only backwoods hunters are consistently into. We also have invasive pythons down in Florida, yet invasive python handbags really haven't hit the market yet. Now, granted, scientists in Florida currently are trying to find ways to eat these pythons, but doesn't that just prove my point? If we want to be the dreamers of tomorrow's products, we have to look at every option, even if those options are delicious, delicious python burgers. And finally, we have to think about the cost. Synthetics are popular because they are cheap to produce and cheap to buy. Factory farming, too, isn't cruel because we as humans are inherently cruel, but because cruelty is cheaper. We at RISD, here today, are incredibly fortunate to be at this school, not just to be accepted, but to be in a position to afford its tuition. If we are to be the dreamers of tomorrow's products, then we need to find ways to cheaply produce them, find ways for them to break down sustainably, farm our animals in ways that are causing the least harm, and reuse what we ultimately already have. What materials we use in our art are up to us. But I, in my personal practice, have found more and more that I want to work harmoniously with my environment, to preserve my land for futures of humans and non-humans alike. I'd rather not have my livestock drinking from water polluted by pleather manufacturing, or have the fur bearers I live alongside unable to reproduce due to microplastic buildup. There is a line to be walked here. It is one that we have yet to perfect, but one that we should continue to strive for. We as humans are good at trying until we find something that works. So for the sake of all of the species that we share our planet with, I leave you now to be humans, as creative as you possibly can be. Let's find a way to use all of the materials given to us.